He said it loud enough for the whole street to hear. Not the living room, not even the front porch. He walked out to the driveway where Mrs. Kellerman across the street was watering her roses, and the Tran family, 3 houses down, had their garage door open, and he held up the envelope like he was presenting a trophy. "I want you out in 48 hours, he said. "Brooke's moving in. This is her home now. You leave with whatever fits in your car." I looked at him. I looked at the envelope. I looked at Mrs. Kellerman, who had stopped pretending not to listen, and I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt. I was. 8 years of a life together, and he was doing this in the driveway on a Tuesday morning while I was still holding my coffee mug. But I smiled because he had no idea what was actually about to happen, and some part of me, the part that had spent the last 4 months quietly, carefully, making sure I would be okay no matter what, found the whole thing almost funny. I took the envelope. I went back inside. I set my coffee down on the kitchen counter, and I called my attorney. I should back up. My name is not important. What matters is that I'm 41 years old. I'm a licensed landscape architect, and for the better part of a decade, I put most of what I earned into a marriage I thought we were building together. My husband. I'll call him my husband because that's what he still was, legally, on that Tuesday morning. Worked in pharmaceutical sales. Good money. Travel. Long stretches where he was home and long stretches where he was. I told myself that was just the nature of the job. The gym membership started about 2 years ago. I know how that sounds. But at the time, I thought it was a midlife health kick. He was 44. He'd put on some weight. I was glad he was taking care of himself. I didn't think much of it when he started coming home later. I didn't think much of it when he started caring about his hair again, or when he switched to a different cologne without telling me. Then his best friend's wife pulled me aside at a 4th of July cookout last summer and said, quietly, not looking me in the eye, "I don't want to be the one to tell you this." She was, though. She told me anyway. Her name was Brooke. She was 32. She'd met my husband at a fitness retreat in Scottsdale, one of those weekend things his company paid for. She did something with social media. She had her own podcast about manifestation and aligned energy and something called vibrational wealth, which, as far as I could tell, meant she sold online courses to people who wanted to believe money could be summoned by thinking about it correctly. I spent 2 weeks after that cookout deciding what to do. I didn't cry very much. That surprised me. I'd always thought if something like this happened, I'd fall apart. Instead, I felt this strange, cold clarity, like when the power goes out at night and suddenly you can see exactly where everything is, because the usual noise and light are gone. I called a divorce attorney, not my husband's friend's firm, which is where we'd always said we'd go for estate planning someday, but a woman I found through my colleague Deborah, who had been through her own divorce 3 years prior and came out the other side with her house, her retirement accounts, and her dignity more or less intact. Her attorney was named Patricia Holt, and she was 60 years old and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and did not waste a single word. "Tell me everything you own jointly," she said, "and then tell me everything you own separately." That second list was longer than my husband knew. 4 years ago, my mother passed away. She left me her house in Asheville, North Carolina, a 3-bedroom craftsman on a quiet street with a wraparound porch and a detached studio she'd used as a pottery workshop. I'd never told my husband how much it appraised for. He knew about the house, vaguely, the way you know about things that don't seem relevant to your daily life. What he didn't know was that I'd spent 2 years quietly renovating it, using money from my own separate savings account, the one I'd maintained since before we were married, and that it was now worth $412,000. I'd also, in that same quiet way, rolled over a portion of my 401k into a separate IRA after the last time we'd had a fight about money, on the advice of Patricia Holt's financial planner. The house we lived in, the one my husband was now standing in the driveway of, handing me an envelope, was jointly owned. And he knew that. What he didn't know, or had apparently forgotten, was what jointly owned meant. Patricia explained it to me very patiently the first time we met. "He can't tell you to leave," she said. "He cannot compel you to vacate a property you co-own unless there is a court order, which there isn't." "He doesn't know that," I said. She looked at me over her reading glasses. "Does he need to? Right now?" I thought about it for a long moment. No, I said, not yet. The 48 hours came and went. I didn't leave. He came home that Thursday evening expecting to find the closet half empty and the note on the counter, and instead he found me sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and the new David Sedaris book, and the look on his face was, I won't pretend I didn't enjoy it. Just a little. What are you still doing here? He said. I live here, I said. Co-own, technically. He called his attorney the next morning. I know this because he told me, loudly, standing in the hallway. His attorney, it turned out, told him more or less what Patricia had told me, except from the other direction. He could not make me leave. If you wanted the house, we would have to negotiate. Brooke, apparently, did not take this well. She had already started telling people, friends, family, her podcast listeners, apparently, that she was moving into a house in New Jersey. She had already posted about it online. Vaguely the way people do when they want credit for something without providing specifics, but enough that people who knew us could connect the dots. One of her posts had something about stepping into the life you've aligned yourself to receive, and when my colleague Deborah showed it to me, I laughed until I had to put my phone down. She thinks she's moving into your house, Deborah said. She's not moving into my house, I said. The thing is, I might have let it all play out quietly. I might have hired movers, split the assets, been reasonable and civil and moved on with my life. That's what Patricia kept gently steering me toward, and she was right. Clean, efficient, emotionally intact. But then I found out about the money. My husband had been doing something for at least a year that I can only describe in polite terms as creatively redistributing our joint finances. Patricia's forensic accountant found it. We'd hired her after I noticed. During one of the many evenings I was now spending alone, going through bank statements, that a consulting firm called BV Strategic Partners had received 4 payments totaling just over $38,000 over the past 11 months. The payments were routed through our joint checking account. I had never heard of BV Strategic Partners. I had never seen any invoice or contract or deliverable that would explain what services, exactly, we had received for $38,000. The forensic accountant's name was Janet, and she had the energy of someone who genuinely enjoyed finding things that weren't meant to be found. BV Strategic Partners, she said, sliding a sheet of paper across the table to me and Patricia. Registered LLC in Delaware. Single member. No employees. No website. No client list. Filed a 1099 form once. She paused. Want to know who filed it? I already knew. I think I knew before she said it. The registered agent for BV Strategic Partners was Brooke. I want to be careful here because I am not a lawyer and I am not going to tell you I understood every piece of what happened next. What I can tell you is that the moment Patricia and Janet spread those documents out on the conference table, something in the room shifted. This changes the conversation, Patricia said, in the way that attorneys say things when they mean something significant but don't want to overstate it. Janet was less restrained. Fraudulent transfer, she said. At minimum. Depending on what else we find, potentially more. We found more. There were hotel bookings, 11 of them over 14 months, all in cities where my husband had sales conferences. There were restaurant receipts. There were 2 charges from a jewelry store in Midtown Manhattan that I will not dwell on except to say they were not for me. All of it run through accounts that, technically, belonged to both of us. There was also, and this is the part that still makes me feel a strange combination of sad and furious, a charge for a deposit on an apartment in our town, 4 blocks from our house. He had put a deposit on an apartment for Brooke, 4 blocks away, with our money. Patricia filed the amended divorce petition the following week. It was a substantially different document than the one we'd been planning. The deposition happened on a Wednesday. My husband arrived with his attorney, a man I recognized vaguely from the local bar association, pleasant enough, clearly not prepared for what was about to happen. My husband was wearing a new blazer. He looked confident. He looked like a man who believed this was going to be uncomfortable but manageable. Janet sat beside Patricia and me. Before we begin, Patricia said, I want to introduce some documents. She placed them on the table. BV Strategic Partners, the payments, the LLC registration, the hotel receipts, The jewelry, the deposit. My husband looked at the documents. He looked at his attorney. His attorney looked at the documents. "I'd like to request a brief recess," his attorney said. "Of course," Patricia said pleasantly. They were in the hallway for 45 minutes. When they came back, his attorney was carrying a yellow legal pad covered in handwriting. My husband had taken off the blazer. He looked like a different person than the one who had stood in our driveway, holding that envelope up for the whole street to see. "My client would like to discuss settlement," his attorney said. Brooke did not take the news quietly. I know this because she went on her podcast and, without naming names, did an episode about interjet betrayal and people who try to block your alignment, which her listeners clearly understood was about something specific, and which generated a comment thread that my Deborah texted me screenshots of for about a week afterward. I did not listen to the episode. I did not need to. What I heard, secondhand, through the very efficient gossip network of our town, was that Brooke had not known about the deposit on the apartment being made with joint marital funds. Or possibly she had known and had decided, upon reflection, that this was a fact she'd prefer not to have known. Either way, the relationship between her and my husband became somewhat complicated after the deposition, which is, I think, the word. She was not moving into any house. Not our joint house, not the apartment 4 blocks away, not anywhere she had apparently been planning to move. My husband, in the settlement, received his car, his retirement accounts, his personal savings, and a portion of the proceeds from the sale of the house, after reimbursement to the marital estate for the $38,000 in fraudulent transfers, which his attorney negotiated down from what Janet had originally identified, but which still represented a significant sum going back where it belonged. I received the rest of the house proceeds, my Asheville property, my IRA, and my business assets, which Patricia had quietly made sure were documented, valued, and protected 6 months before any of this became official. I moved to Asheville 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I had the pottery studio converted into a home office. I joined a local landscape architecture firm and, within a year, became a partner. The wraparound porch has a view of the mountains that, on clear mornings, makes me stop whatever I'm doing and just stand there for a minute. My mother would have liked knowing the house went to use. Mrs. Kellerman, who still sends me Christmas cards, told me she washed from her roses the morning my husband stood in the driveway with that envelope, and that even from across the street she could see something was wrong with the way he held himself, like he was performing for an audience instead of actually living something real. She said she thought at the time, that man does not know his wife as well as he thinks he does. She was right. I still have the coffee mug from that morning. It's white with a small chip on the rim from where I set it down on the kitchen counter, a little too hard before I called Patricia. I use it every day, not as a reminder of anything painful, just because it's a good mug and it was there and it held up. Some things, when you actually look at them clearly, turn out to belong to you more than anyone ever realized. The coffee was hot that morning. The future was open in a way I hadn't been able to see yet. And when the papers landed in my hands on that driveway, the one thing I was completely sure of, even then, even before I knew how any of it would unfold, was that whatever came next was going to be mine to build. My porch, my mountains, my house, mine. I keep thinking about the coffee mug. It's a small thing. Chipped rim, plain white, nothing special about it. But I set it down hard that Tuesday morning. Not in anger, exactly, more like punctuation, and it held. 400 miles later, it's sitting on the windowsill of my Asheville kitchen, and I use it every single day. I think about what it took to get here, and I don't mean the legal process, or the settlement, or the forensic accountant's spreadsheets, though all of that mattered. I mean the quieter thing underneath it, the decision, made a long time before any papers were thrown, to keep something for myself. Not out of suspicion. Not because I saw this coming, just because some part of me understood, even in a good season of the marriage, that a person shouldn't dissolve entirely into a shared life, that your name on a document means something, that knowing your own financial picture isn't a betrayal of trust, it's just basic self-respect. My husband stood in that driveway believing he held all the power because he was the one making the declaration. That's the thing about people who confuse noise with leverage. He announced. He performed, he made sure the neighbors heard, and he walked back inside thinking the matter was settled. What he didn't account for was the 4 years of quiet work I'd done on my mother's house. The separate account I'd maintained since before we married. The attorney I called within the hour. Not because I'd planned for betrayal, but because I'd always understood that being a good partner doesn't mean giving up every independent foothold you have. The money he moved through BV Strategic Partners, I don't think he started that believing himself to be a dishonest person. That's the part that actually keeps me up at night when I let it. People rarely do. They start with a small justification, then another, and somewhere along the way, the gap between who they believe they are and what they're actually doing becomes too wide to see clearly. He made choices that compounded over 11 months into something a forensic accountant could put on a timeline. The consequences followed from the choices. That's not punishment from the universe. That's just how things work. What I learned. What I'd tell anyone sitting in the early, disorienting days of something like this is that the groundwork you lay when everything is fine is the only thing that saves you when it isn't. Patricia didn't conjure my Asheville property out of thin air. The IRA rollover didn't happen because I was clever in a crisis. Those things existed because years before any crisis, I paid attention, I kept records, I made deliberate decisions about my own financial life instead of outsourcing that thinking entirely to someone else. That's not cynicism, that's not distrust. It's the difference between being a participant in your own life and being a passenger in someone else's version of it. The wraparound porch has a mountain view that stops me every clear morning. My mother sat on that porch for 30 years. I used to think I understood what it meant to her. I don't think I really did until I was standing there myself, coffee in hand with the particular quiet that comes after a very loud chapter finally closes. I built something. Quietly, carefully, over years. And when someone tried to tell me it wasn't mine, when someone stood in a driveway and said the words out loud, loud enough for everyone to hear, what I felt underneath the hurt was the solid, unmistakable weight of knowing exactly what was true. That's the only foundation worth building on. The one you actually laid yourself.